You are listening to the I Choose My Best Life podcast with Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith, a show that is dedicated to helping you live fully, love boldly, and rest intentionally. For additional resources, visit ichoosemybestlife.com.
Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Saundra, and you're listening to I Choose My Best Life. Today, we're going to be jumping into a topic that I am just loving. It's the title of a new book that's coming out titled Underestimated. And I think that many of us have felt that way at some point in time in our journeys. And let's be honest, sometimes we're the person who's underestimating ourselves. And so I have with me today Mary Marantz, who is going to actually help us see what are the shifts that can occur in our lives that can take us to the place of God's best. Mary, I want to thank you so much for joining me. And I want you to begin by just really sharing, when someone writes a book, I always feel like there's an underpinning that's leading to this conversation. And I know you've mentioned that you grew up in a situation that most people would not have anticipated would have developed the life that you're now living and walking out. What was that journey like for you?
Oh my gosh. First of all, Dr. Saundra, I just love you with my whole heart. I just had the huge honor of having you on my show not too long ago and just fell in love with you. There were like 27 mic drop moments. I'm not even going to know how to pull out the best quotes because there're just so many. And so what fun it is to get to turn the tables and have you put the hot seat on me. Yeah, so for everybody listening, if you're meeting me for the first time, the sort of elevator pitch version of my story is that I grew up in a single wide trailer in rural West Virginia on the top of a mountain called Fenwick Mountain. And when I say single wide trailer, I truly mean it in the most traditional sense, like that picture you might have in your head. This was not a double wide trailer with a permanent foundation. This was a tin can. And the thing to do in the 1980s with a single wide trailer was to build the lean-to shack, one room, bonus room addition with whatever wood was basically piled up in the yard. So all mismatched wood, very crooked, rusty nails. And surprising to nobody, trailers built in the late 1970s, early 1980s were not built to last. And so very young in my life, like age 4, if not younger, the roof really starts to leak. The ceiling starts to cave in. The floor starts to cave in. The brown shag carpeting was caked with mud from my dad's logging boots. We had stray animals that would go inside the house as much as they would go outside the house. So I would always say, you don't know where that brown shag carpeting ended and the dirt began. You kind of had to know where to hopscotch around on the carpet so you didn't fall through the floor and so you didn't step into anything you didn't want to. And so there were mushrooms growing out of the carpet at one point. We had an old wood stove that basically shot flames across the ceiling. It was a really, if you were doing kind of the only phrase that kind of comes to mind here is like Disney-fied version of a single wide trailer in rural West Virginia. That was basically like what it was like, this sort of very similar to a Dolly Parton feel. And we love Dolly over here, just to be clear. So it was just this very like, in a lot of ways, cliche picture of Appalachia. And Dr. Saundra, when I was writing my first book, Dirt, I really wanted to be careful with that because there's so many things people think they know about Appalachia, these boxes that it checks. You live in a trailer, the truck is up on cinder blocks, you have stray dogs, your dad is a logger or a coal miner, you're probably Scotch-Irish. And it's for me and my story, it's like, check. And so I wanted to tell people, draw them in close enough to tell them what they think they already know about Appalachia so that I could tell them what it's really and how it built me. And so to getting to your point, we fast forward a little bit and I end up at Yale for law school. And the combination of those two extremes has kicked off a lifetime of feeling underestimated, getting to the number one law school in the country and still not feeling like enough, instead underestimating myself for another 20 years. We say we write the book that we need, to your point earlier. And so I have lived this message for 40 plus years. And only in the last couple of years have I really started to unravel, why am I the one who does this to myself?
Yes. I always find it interesting when I speak with someone who's gone through, and I say gone through lightly because it's, I should say not lightly, because I feel like it's one of those situations where we feel like we are pushing through the dirt, so to speak, about our lives. And that actually is what helps us to bloom into who we are.
Yeah.
And when we are going through that process, sometimes some of the choices that we end up making in life, like where to go to school or who to marry or where to live, really have an underfooting and an underpinning related to those experiences from our past. I'm curious, in your journey, in the choice of where you went to law school, was there any within you? And I say this because for me, it was a huge thing. It's okay, no, everyone's underestimating me, so I'm going to show them. I'm going to get into whatever. There was any of that kind of undergirding your decision to even apply and attend Yale?
100%. 100%. It's a both and situation. So I'll give you the shortest version of that. 100%. I spent most of my life trying to prove people wrong. In the book, there's this part where I talk about, for some of us, other people's doubts blurred and bled into our head, this auto-tuned and amplified voice of reason that says it would be safer not to show up. For some of us, it keeps us stuck, staying still right where we are. For others of us, though, in a true Jeff Goldblum-worthy life finds a way, adapt or find yourself exchange moment of clarity, we take those underestimations, we take those petrified doubts, inject them with every ounce of survival wired right into our DNA, and hatch an entirely different species of success altogether. Now we are the keepers of every perceived slight, the patron saints of the underdogs, these oracles of the uninvited. For those of us in the sacred order of the underestimated, we found a way to take other people's doubts and harness them as jet fuel. And so that's the both. That's the one side. That's the yes. The other side is that I simultaneously doubted myself for every single thing I do. I didn't think I should go to WVU for college because I thought I was going to fail out. The state university of the state I grew up in, because it was 22,000 students, and my whole town, if you brought everybody down from the mountains, was 2,000 people. And so I thought there was a direct correlation that if you start small, you stay small. And so I was terrified to apply to college. I was terrified to go to college. I ran so hard from being afraid of failing that I stumbled into success. And I actually wasn't the one who sent in my application to Yale. I thought it would have been the equivalent of lighting a $100 bill on fire for the application fee. A friend of mine took my other applications, forced me to write the one extra 250-word essay that Yale required that was different than everybody else, and paid the $100 application fee for me. And so my life could have been very different if I had let the voices of underestimation win. And I did let them win, but somebody else stepped in. And so that is like one of those close enough calls where I see what I would have missed out on, that it has terrified me of ever letting fear win again. So in a sort of like fight fear with fear, I'm rubber, you're glue sort of way, being afraid of that regret has kept me fighting to keep fear in its place.
Oh, what a beautiful image. As you were sharing about that, I just had that image of the friends with the carrying their friend to Jesus, and they're like, we're going to get them in, and we're letting them down through the roof. And it was that type of person who actually helps us get past some of our own negative thinking, limited beliefs, fear, all of those things that make us feel like, oh, that's not possible for me. Whatever the blessing, whatever the big is that God does in people's lives is not going to happen in my life. And that's why I feel like even within the subtitle of your book, the book is titled Underestimated, The Surprisingly Simple Shift to Quit Playing Small, Name the Fear, and Move Forward Anyway. And I think sometimes when we think about getting on the other side, so to speak, of fear, we think that there is some like great thing that has to happen. It's going to be so much work, and it's going to take all of this labor. And I love that you say it's surprisingly simple. Give us a little more detail about what this shift entails.
Yeah, I'll preface it. Let's just say the quiet part out loud. It's simple, not always easy. Simple, not always easy. So we won't fake the funk right there. I'll call that out like it is. So in this book, which is very much centered around the idea that fear is a boring liar, and each chapter is a different face that fear likes to put on. It's premised under the idea that it is shape-shifting into these different either broken scripts or like faces that it puts on, and it uses really all the same ones on us, the same ones it uses on me, it uses on you, and vice versa. And it's been doing this for thousands of years. And so we have the procrastination chapter, the people-pleasing chapter, the imposter syndrome, overthinking, even a fear of success. There's 14 in total, where each chapter I'm like going 14 rounds with fear to take down that mask. And 1 and 2 kind of really lay out the problem, right? So chapter 1 is we're pushing a boulder up the mountain over and over again. It feels so much harder for us than it does other people. Why do we keep being our own worst enemies? Why do we keep blinking right at our breakthrough moment? We lose our grip, we lose our way, and the boulder rolls all the way back down the mountain. And then chapter 2, we kind of get into some of these characteristics of fear. We need to understand about how he's going to try to do battle with us, and that he is a boring liar, and that he's jealous of creatives because he himself is not creative at all. But he's not creative, but he is productive. So he knows how to prioritize. And so he will only show up if we're about to do work that matters. So we can actually use that to predict when we're on the right track. And chapter 3 is really where the work of the book begins. This is that shift that we're talking about. To really explain that, I first have to admit to you and all of your people that one of my guilty pleasures, some people have The Bachelor, some people have the Kardashians. I watch and look at really cheesy Instagram success accounts, the ones that have a lion and a Lamborghini. Roar until you get everything you came for. These are my guilty pleasures, and I look at them all the time, mostly to hate them in my head, laugh at them in my head. But this one day, there was a post that was a quick scroll by that was different than what they normally share, and it was a picture of a shot glass. And it said, if you think that you have the capacity of a shot glass, then every time you get a little bit more than that, you will subconsciously shrink yourself down. And then I added, until you fit back into the tiny containers you believe you belong in. And it was just the clearest explanation of self-sabotage I'd ever seen. It said the goal should be to expand your capacity, expand it until it's an infinity pool. And of course, it had to be an infinity pool on an account like that, but the point was really clear. And so 2 days later, I had Dr. Allison Cook on my podcast, The Mary Marantz Show, and I was telling her about the shot glass. And I said, how do we stop doing this if we don't even know we're doing it half the time, if we're doing it subconsciously? And so we pulled up this part of her book, The Best of You, that said, if you grew up with a sense of chaos and instability, if you never really learned safety as a child, it can flip a survival mode switch in you that makes you return to chaos every chance that you get. But we can actually, as the grown-up, reparent ourselves, reteach ourselves a sense of safety. And she said, you do that by setting small, so they have to be manageable, but important, they have to matter, commitments to yourself, and actually keep them. And she said, as you do that, as you honor commitments to yourself, both big and small, day by day, month by month, year by year, and then she looked me right in the eye and she said, Mary, you are showing yourself that there is a grown-up in the room who can be trusted. That grown-up is you. And so the shift becomes, most of the time we think that in order to quit playing small, we have to go big, swing for the fences, leap, and the net will appear. But I've had so many go big moment days in my life only to wake up the next morning and go right back to second guessing myself because none of that felt like something that I was. It just felt like something that had happened to me. And so paradoxically, some of the most important work we will do to quit playing small is by actually starting small, setting those small commitments, keeping them, stretching that capacity, going from a shot glass to a pitcher to an infinity pool, whatever, where we believe we can steward the things that we're holding well. And the more we feel like the grown-up in the room, the more we feel like we can be trusted with. And I'm saying trust in a little t sort of way, a stewardship way, not a big T where we put our ultimate hope and trust kind of way. But the stewardship's a big part of it. The ability to trust ourselves to steward well or not trust ourselves is why that third person with the talents buried them, right? I'm afraid I'm going to mess it up. I'm afraid I'm going to get it wrong. So I'd rather just hide it away than rather risk losing it altogether. But ironically, that's exactly what happened because the gifts weren't being used.
Yeah, I think sometimes we don't really appreciate just what playing small does to our identity. It keeps our identity feeling compressed and limited and confined to spaces that doesn't give the freedom to be able to expand and to increase our capacity for those greater levels of whatever God is doing in our lives. And fear certainly is a huge part of that. I love that you walked through some of the very common fears that people come up against when they're moving through this process of really taking that shift from moving beyond what they initially, or maybe other people have initially said is possible for them. When you were going through this for yourself, which fear, or maybe there were more than one, because I know for myself, there were a couple, but was there a primary fear that had to be named, or maybe one that was even, you surprised yourself that's what you were facing?
Yeah. You know what I would say? Here's the thing that I thought was the most surprising for me. You know this as an author yourself. The idea will tell you what it wants to be. As you're writing it, it will unravel itself to you. It will reveal itself to you. And so when I first started writing this book, in true underdog, let me show you how far I've come, I'm going to use it as jet fuel kind of way, I thought it was a book 100% about when other people do this to us. When they look right through us, when we don't get that invitation to the table, when they miss our gifts, when they act like we don't matter at all, whatever the case is. And I would say that about 20% of this book is that, because that's a real thing that exists. People are going to look right through you at times and not see the magic that you hold inside. But it turned out that 80% of the book became when we do this to ourselves. There's actually now a tagline on the cover that says, because the person counting you out the most just might be you. And that was, we write the books that we need. That was me really wrestling with that of, okay, why do I keep starting over? Why do I keep balking when the ledge comes back around? Why do I keep blinking at the breakthrough moment? Why do I keep self-sabotaging? Why do I keep saying I want to do this thing and then doing the opposite? Why do I hide in plain sight and call it perfectionism and act like that's a good thing? And so I would say that that was the biggest surprise for me. And the one that I probably had to do the most battle with is one I've done my whole life, which is this belief that perfect can actually keep me safe. That if I can just make it good enough, perfect enough, if I can think through every possible potential criticism and account for it, then nobody can ever hurt me again. And in that chapter, which is chapter 10, perfectionism is hiding with better PR. It actually ends by saying, we think if we're perfect enough, we'll finally be accepted, chosen, loved. Let's just call it what it is. We think if we're perfect enough, no one will ever leave us again. And then it goes on to talk about my mom leaving when I was 9, and how I started to think if I can build a pretty enough life on the outside, starting from that trailer and building it to what it is now, then I can make her regret not being there for it. I can use perfect as a weapon, but really it's perfect as a stiff arm to keep me safe from anybody being able to hurt me again. But what turns out being really good at not needing people is a great way not to have them. So there's so much in this book that's like funny and playful and movie quotes, and then it's boom, we're going to go 7 layers deep and talk about our whole lives before we go on stage. And so we peel back the layer in each chapter, and a lot of it has to do with, what do we think this thing is actually keeping us safe from? What do we think this thing is actually offering us? And is it worth the trade-off of never once getting moving on the dream?
There is so much wisdom there that I could unpack, but I think just hearing you share about this, it really makes me think about how so much of this is rooted on our intrinsic desire, I should say, to control things, to control the outcome, to control what happens next, to control our level of exposure, to control our level of vulnerability. A big part of this kind of fear mechanism that we can get trapped into when we are living an underestimated life. And as you mentioned, most of the time we're the one doing it. But a big part of that is just this control that we want to maintain. And as you stated earlier, it is not easy. It takes quite a bit of internal work to be able to take those types of steps and to move forward anyway. What have you found personally when you come up against some of these fears? What has been a practice or a mechanism maybe that you have seen helps you to keep moving forward?
Yeah, this is one of the fun parts of the book, is that it actually gets into some of the science and the psychology of this stuff as well. And that's really fun to have like this very serious thought leader book that has like Care Bears in chapter 2 and deep scientific studies also in chapter 2, but in all the other chapters as well. And so in chapter 7, Overthinking is an Orange Safety Cone, I actually talk about something called the Bayesian brain theory, which is more commonly referred to as predictive brain theory, which in its most simple terms says that your brain is an incredible prediction machine. And it can predict with great accuracy whether you will actually succeed at something or not before you even begin. And it's basing this on all of the inputs and data and sensory gatherings that it's done up until this point, what has always been true up until this point. And so if it thinks you are not going to succeed, it will do what is often referred to in the literature as the amygdala hijack, where it's actually just like this instant 90-degree derailment, a sort of like hard pivot, turn to something that's more low cost, low effort, instant reward. So an instant gratification, get a gold star, check something immediately off your list, rather than sitting down for hours at a time to do this hard thing like writing a book, for example. And so the cool thing about Bayesian brain theory is that the models are constantly updating. They're constantly taking in all the sensories around them. They're constantly looking at what works, what didn't. They're constantly updating. And so by doing these small shifts, by showing up and doing small hard things and then increasingly larger and larger hard things, what we're doing is we're giving our brains new input. We're saying we can do hard things. We are people who can sit through the uncomfortable. We are people who can feel the fear, be afraid, name it, and move forward anyway. And the more we do it, the more our brain updates with the models and goes, oh, cool. So maybe now there's like a 50-50 chance of you doing it. Maybe now it's 60-40. And it's going to stop doing that hijack that makes you want to instantly run away and go do something easier. And so your brain will actually cooperate with you and rewire itself. The more you show up and put in the reps, build the muscle memory of doing hard things, the less your brain will try to get you to quit before you even start. So I'm doing that a lot. I'm getting really comfortable being afraid every day and doing the things anyway. I'm just really sweaty all the time now, basically.
You
But
keep your cortisol level on check.
And like the more that I do it, the more that it's like when you sit in the same spot to write every day, your brain goes, okay, we're writing now. I got it. And so the more I'm doing hard things, the more I'm doing scary things, the more I'm doing things way outside my comfort zone, the more my brain gets on board. And it's just been really wild to watch.
Yeah, I think we definitely have to retrain our programming, specifically some of our childhood programming. If you grew up in situations where there was a mindset of this is as good as it gets, this is our life, this is what people like us experience, however that looks in your particular situation. I think quite a few people have grown up in those humble beginnings and have had to overcome some of those mindsets that were based around their upbringing. I would love for you, before our time comes to an end, I'd love to go into a little bit of a conversation about, you mentioned that we are failing at failure. We are not approaching it in the best way possible for us to be able to move forward. So for the person who might be listening right now and thinking, okay, I tried to get into that college, or did try and take a step, and hey, it didn't work out the way I wanted. What encouragement do you have for that person?
Yeah, the first thing that was coming up for me when you were just saying all that, and you were describing like a lot of us having these humble beginnings, which I just felt this like flood of affection come over me, both for your story, my story, and all the people listening who are those hard story underdogs in a good way. So like in the book, I talk about, if we're not careful, the underdog is a role of a lifetime, meaning we could, if we're not careful, we could spend our whole life playing that part. But like those of us who are overcomers, I just felt this very warm rush of affection of, man, I'm so proud of us. I'm so proud of what, like the work we've done to even get to this place. Like those of us who are the first in our family to go to college, or maybe be able to buy a home or have secure parenting styles, or whatever the case is. Like if nobody has told you recently and you're listening and you're one of the hard story people, I just want you to know it is seen and it is noticed and it matters, and your whole family tree rumbles and reckons with the roots that you are putting down right now. You are changing things. Your family tree will have a Sharpie mark through it that is a before and an after. My friend Hannah Brencher talks about the Sharpie mark. That is you. You are going to change things that dramatically for your entire family tree. And I'm just proud of you. And it's hard work. And in chapter 4, I actually talk about what we're really feeling out here. Chapter 4 is second guessing is a missing handbook. Every hard story person I know in real life feels like we missed out on being given this handbook for life that everybody else seemed to have gotten one night over dinner. Chad passed the mashed potatoes, and oh, by the way, make sure you understand compound interest, right? And the rest of us feel like we're stumbling through. I even say it's like those of us who feel like we don't have the pertinent parts. We're like Edward Scissorhands dropped down in some color-coded pastel suburban hell. When we break the rules because we do not know the rules, somehow we are the ones who die death by 1,000 cuts. And later in that chapter, I talk about what we're really experiencing here is hard story fatigue. We're tired of it being this hard. We're tired of it feeling this lonely. We're tired of having to bear up our whole family trees on our backs, even if we do believe we're going to be the ones that change things. And so for people like us, because we do feel such a responsibility, and we do tell ourselves, even though those of us of faith know it's not true, that we're the only ones holding it all together, we feel like one slip up. The whole reason the metaphor of the mountain and the boulder came to exist, Saundra, is because over a decade ago, about 13 years ago, I was sitting in a nail salon with some friends. I can remember it very vividly. And I said, I just feel like I'm pushing this boulder up the mountain over and over again. And if I flip once, if I let it go once, it's going to roll all the way back down. And my friend said, why can't you just lay it down to rest in one of the scenic overlooks? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. This does not compute. This is totally different than how I look at life. And so for those of us who feel like if we slip up once, all of this progress we've made is going to come crashing down, What I would say to you is that the resilience and the grit and the purpose that got you here, that got you this far, is actually not going to be what's going to carry you the rest of the way. It's going to be a part of it. But the reason you keep starting over is because the preparation, the refinement, the sanctification, a new kind of grit muscle, a new kind of resilience muscle that's going to be forged in trying hard things you haven't been able to do before and failing. That's going to be the kind of training that's going to get you the rest of the way. So part of the reason we keep starting over is we just simply haven't built those muscles yet. And that's going to require us doing things we don't automatically know we will be good at. And showing up, feeling the fear, naming the fear, and doing it anyway.
Yes, we've been chatting with Mary Marantz, and she has released a powerful new book titled Underestimated: The Surprisingly Simple Shift to Quit Playing Small, Name the Fear, and Move Forward Anyway. Mary, I would love to have you share how people can get a copy of your book and learn about all the different things that you're doing. She also has a podcast, so I would love for you to share a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, come listen to Dr. Saundra's episode on my podcast, The Mary Marantz Show. You can find that on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts, or just go to themarymarantzshow.com. That'll get you all linked up. I also have a couple fun things for you people. I'll just say really quickly. One of them is I introduced these 5 achiever types in Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots, my second book, but they actually carry over into Underestimated. And it's like how these achiever types get stuck playing small, get tripped up, and how we can move forward anyway. And so we have the performer who's always on their toes, who needs to show themselves, but also for sure other people how far they've come. I am a classic performer. We have the tightrope walker who's always on their toes. Sorry, they're not on their toes. They're on the high wire. They could care less who's clapping, but they need higher and higher death-defying feats to feel the same amount of good. The masquerader shoves other people into the spotlight in this tricky sleight of hand so that they can hide in plain sight. The contortionist is the classic people pleaser. They contort smaller and smaller because to contort is easier than to be criticized. And the illusionist in the distance believes that all the conditions to begin and they themselves must be perfect before they can even start. And so if you go to achieverquiz.com, we have put together a fun quiz for you. It takes 2 minutes to take, 10 minutes if you overthink it. The questions are super fun. The results are super deep. I'm going to tell you based on your achiever type where you get stuck playing small and how you move forward anyway. So that's at achieverquiz.com or marymorantz.com/quiz. My last name is Marantz. And then if you go to namethefear.com, we actually have the whole first chapter for your listener, Saundra, up there. They can download it and start reading today, get a feel for my writing, get a feel for how I set up this boulder getting pushed up the mountain problem. And then there's all the other information about where you can grab the book over there as well. So that's at namethefear.com. And yeah, come over on Instagram at Mary Marantz and tell me what achiever type you got. I'm very curious to hear.
Excellent. And we will link to namethefear.com as well as to the Achiever Quiz over on the show notes so that you'll be able to quickly pull up these resources and dive deeper into Mary's work. Mary, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. I just think you're wonderful.
Until next time, everyone, live fully, love boldly, and rest intentionally. The world pressures us to do so we can accomplish more. But God invites us to be so we can embrace our true identity as women who are known, needed, and loved. Join me this summer for the Being Fully Known Book Club starting June 2nd. Visit beingfullyknown.com.